It gives me great pleasure to welcome Dan Roth, the executive editor at LinkedIn.
Thank you very much. Hi, it's great to be here. This is a great room. I was really excited to come knowing that the topic today was fearlessness. And I thought it might be good to start with a tale of true personal professional terror as a way to set apart what the opposite of fearlessness is. I'm a longtime business journalist. I worked with those guys who were just on. I was at Fortune, Forbes, Portfolio, Wired, and all along the way, I would do massive cover stories, 3 to 5 a year. And the way that we would come up with these ideas was I would talk with an editor, we would brainstorm what we thought was interesting, and then I would disappear for 2 months and come back with a story that seemed great. We'd print it, I'd disappear, start the whole process over again. It was an exceptionally fun job and an incredible career until the day I realized that it was all over. I was working on a story about demand media. Demand media, I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but demand media would take vast amounts of search queries. They would look to see what the Google keyword prices were for those queries, and then they would hire writers to do stories based on what advertisers wanted and what readers wanted. And writers would get paid $15 to do stories on things like how to throw a Cars-themed birthday party or kayaking paddling tips. And as I wrote the story, I realized that the career I had grown up with was over. I felt like Wile E. Coyote, running in air and not realizing that the ground had disappeared from underneath me. The machines had won. There was no need for editors anymore. You didn't need to think about what was incredible. You didn't need to be creative. Creativity, in fact, was worthless if your audience could tell you exactly what they wanted, and advertisers could tell you what they wanted. What was the point in being creative and coming up with something new? And it was soon after that that I left magazines for good. Now, here's what we know now. I was totally wrong. Demand didn't win. The idea that readers and viewers of these videos would love getting these type of things was totally mistaken. Yes, it's what they were searching for, but when they saw the results, they were unhappy. They were purely transactional. On the other hand, what I had grown up with, the way of life that I had existed in traditional media, that was obsolete as well. The idea that an editor and a writer in a tower in Manhattan could come up with what the world wanted to read and not think about the data at all was foolish at best. And in fact, I think that where we are today is you need both, and there's a third part that I'll get to in a second. The data gives you the guidelines for understanding what your readers want and allows you to course correct along the way. The storytelling and the insights that come in your pieces, that's what helps set you apart. It's what brings people back and what builds great connections. Netflix uses data to understand, or used data to understand how to get DVDs to the right people, what they wanted. But it's the great storytelling in the form of House of Cards and others that helps set them apart from their peers and makes them an invaluable service. And now here's the third part. The third part is the audience. The audience wants a platform. We didn't know this because there used to be no great platform for them. But they want this. They want a place to participate, to debate, to tell you why you're wrong, to tell you why you're right, or to tell their own stories. Content is not about us. It's not about the storytellers. It's about the people who are reading and building on it. I think content is just the start. Conversation is what's king. Now, I had a hunch that this was the case, but there was no place to be able to get professionals at scale to test it out. You could only do this if you went where the professionals are, where they had their identities. And when LinkedIn called me for a job, which was ironic since usually you're looking for jobs on LinkedIn, I realized that where the company wanted to go was actually the change of, they had the ability to really change the face of media. Now, you have to remember that for its first 10 years, in fact, many of you may still think of it this way, LinkedIn was really about jobs. It was about connecting people with each other to get them the job that they wanted. But while building a network and listing what you've done and who you've worked for is table stakes to building a professional reputation, it's just the start. That tells someone who you are. But what sets you apart is how you think. About giving people the ability to express their points of views, to share relevant news, to curate the world for their networks, to tell people what they're watching and what's coming down the road. That's how you distinguish yourself. And LinkedIn today isn't just about connecting people with each other anymore. It's about allowing people to create, comment on, and share the content that will help them be better at what they do. So how did we do this? We started in 2011 with something called LinkedIn Today. It's now called LinkedIn Pulse. LinkedIn Today takes 1.6 million feeds from publishers, takes the headlines, and matches the headlines to the right professionals. From this service, we got a tremendous amount of data. We saw what people in different industries were reading. We saw what people at different career levels wanted to find out about, what they were clicking on, what they weren't, what they were sharing, what they weren't. And with that information, we launched in 2012 into original content. This started with the 500 people we call the LinkedIn influencers, people like Richard Branson, Bill Gates, Angela Ahrendts, Ban Ki-moon, Jim Kim. They share insights, ideas about what's coming, how they got where they got, how you can get what they did, what they achieved, what do they hear in the meetings that a lot of people will never be able to sit in. And as LinkedIn, we give them all kinds of data about what people want to hear about, which these influencers are willing to take or leave. They can either understand what's trending and build stories off of it with their personal experience, or they can do whatever they want, talking about their own agendas. And now we're rolling out the ability for members to write for their networks, whether that's 10 people or tens of thousands of people. When a member publishes a post on LinkedIn, his entire network sees it. It becomes part of her professional profile. It's shared with the trusted network, and if it's compelling enough, it can be seen by everyone. This is the largest group of professionals ever assembled. Your work has the ability to reach 200, I think 300 million is what we're up to now, 300 million people. To be fair, the content is all over the map. Some of it is about industry niches, some of it is general. There's the obscure. There was a great piece the other day about a butler talking about modern butlerhood, what it's like to be a butler today. There's other ones where it's just people talking about the news. It's full of experiments, of hits and misses, but the best insight rises to the top and generates tons of engagement. Influencer posts, a little data point, influencer posts alone generate 30,000 views on average and 100 comments. And what's amazing, especially to someone like me who came from traditional media, is the quality of the comments. There is no anonymity on LinkedIn. When people write a comment, whatever they say is seen by their entire networks. It's seen by their boss and their employees and their future business partners. So what does that mean? No trolling, no flame wars. People are pretty careful about what they say. They weigh their words, and they think about leaving a comment that helps brand them. They use this comment to improve their reputations, essentially, to tell people who they are. And they write original posts based on that also. Now, this is people creating brands for themselves, and it's different than brands building up their own brands, but yet it's tied together. These people all work for institutions and companies and nonprofits and schools. They go to schools. They are representing brands, and the best of these companies and institutions will use what these representatives are saying and turn them into content for themselves. They'll help boost the brands of the people who work for them or represent them and turn them into salespeople, into PR people, into brand ambassadors. I'll give you a great example. A guy named Glenn Kelman, who is a LinkedIn influencer, he's the CEO of a company called Redfin. Redfin's an online realtor, and it has a different business model than most realtors, and in fact, a lot of realtors feel very challenged by the Redfin model. A lot of them really hate Redfin, as a matter of fact. When Glenn writes, he writes about things not about real estate. He does that sometimes. What he writes about are things like why it's not wrong to chase unreasonable happiness. What's the meaning of the half-eaten burrito that's always on his desk? Why there should be more funding for cancer research. And he always writes with this incredible candor and authenticity in his words. After writing one post in particular, which was about how college graduates, what his advice would be to college graduates, he got a call from a realtor, his most strident critic, as a matter of fact, who said, I've read your post. I thought it was incredibly touching. It changed the way I think about you. And in fact, I read it to my daughters. She had taken his post and turned it into something for herself. As Glenn says, look, we are human beings, and we have to be about more than selling our companies. You have all these ad agencies who are trying to invest companies with human traits, and yet these companies are full of humans. How do you use the humans inside? We're in a new era when it comes to content. There is no end to the story anymore. When people discuss it and share it, that keeps it growing. It should never stop. On the web, we've grown accustomed to measuring things in terms of clicks. The more you click, the better it's done. But if you think about conversation instead of content, if you think conversation matters, which I do, then clicks aren't the way you want to measure it. Your content is only successful when it takes on a life of its own, when the ideas you've created get run with by the crowd. I'm always more excited to see a story that has sky-high numbers of comments than I am one with sky-high numbers of page views. Page views are easy. So if clicks aren't right, how do you measure it? The value of content to an individual seems fairly self-evident. They're excited if they get anyone reading their post. These are a lot of people who aren't writers originally. But for brands, for you in this room, you have to answer to people at your company. Where does the money go? Are we investing it the right way? What's the ROI? Just throwing things against the wall, which a lot of content creators do to see if it sticks, isn't going to fly when you're trying to get money for your division. So my colleagues at LinkedIn Marketing Solutions have come up with two pretty intriguing ways to help measure and optimize the way brands use content. One is a content marketing score. Look to see how you're doing against your peers, who's engaging with your content, what's working, what's not working. And the second is trending content. What is it that people are talking about? Use this data to help create things that you have a reasonably good idea will actually engage the crowd. But to do it right, this isn't about just creating one piece of content and releasing it to the world. You have to keep doing this over and over again. It is measure often, create often. And it means really being fearless. It means taking tons of risks, not just risks once, not just creating that video that's going to go viral. It means doing it over and over and over again, seeing what works and trying again when it doesn't. For authors, this means giving up a lot of control. And for brands, it's even scarier. It means saying, this is our message. Now we're going to see who runs with it. We have no idea where it's going to go. That's exactly what you want. I'll give you an example of another story of professional terror. This one is much better than mine. This is Stanley McChrystal, former leader of the US troops in Afghanistan. When McChrystal got kicked out of the Army for saying disparaging things about the administration, and Rolling Stone did a story on it, he wrote a piece on LinkedIn about what it was like waking up the next day and not being a soldier. He said for his entire professional life, he had been a soldier. He had worn one uniform since he was 17. He had to shave every day. And he said, I woke up the next day, and who was I? If I'm not a soldier, who am I? I don't have to shave. I don't have to represent anyone. Who am I as a person? He wrote a beautiful piece about it. It got 300 comments, and what was fascinating was that the comments weren't people saying, hey, McChrystal, you're a jerk, or you don't know what you're talking about. It was people saying, I've been through experiences like this. I lost my startup. I lost my job. I had to fire someone whose entire identity was based on their job, and here's what they went through. It was people taking his content and turning it into their own stories. This might be uncomfortable at first. You have to unlearn many of your habits as writers and as marketers. But it's key to getting your content talked about. And I think even scarier than entering this world is the idea of not having anyone talk about you at all. And that's what creating content is really about, having the crowd take it and make it into their own stories. Thank you very much.